As we have seen the last time it's happened, the changes that stylist devs make for the quote-unquote sake of realism end up being rather questionable and sometimes controversial. In case you've been living under a rock, about 2 weeks ago, Phantom Forces received a pretty controversial update, which, as should be expected, was not well received by the community. The update in question removed one of the most fun features, that being launch tech. And again, as should be expected, people were understandably upset about the removal of said feature. Another change in that update that made absolutely no sense is the removal of the 1000 RPM burst fire mode on the AK-12BR for quote-unquote realism, which I've already talked about in this video. If you didn't watch that video and you're wondering why it's nonsensical, it's because the AK-12BR is a fake gun along with its conversions. Therefore, it should go without saying that removing a fictional fire mode from a fictional gun to make it realistic does not quite make sense. But apparently, it happened again in the latest test place update. This time, the DBV-12, or AK-1276 as it's called now, received a controversial change to its 410 bore conversion. They essentially went on and replaced the 1000 RPM 3-round burst with a 600 RPM 2-round burst. And lo and behold, some players were not exactly happy with this change. But from what I've seen, the opinions about this change are fairly polarized. There's of course some people that absolutely love this change, and others who think it's awful and should be reverted. But this is yet again another example of stylists changing a fictional gun for the quote-unquote sake of realism. It almost feels as though stylist devs are like, oh, I see you're all having tons of fun over here. Would be a shame if I took the fun stuff away. However, to put it bluntly, I feel like stylists really cannot talk about realism when the character can somehow survive falling from a 3 if not 4-story building, or can somehow double jump in midair. And I know I already said this in the past, but I don't think they can talk about realism when 90% of the AK-12 variants in the game either have a designation that isn't real or straight up just don't exist in real life. Plus, let's also remember that the AK-15, which by the way is a real AK-12 variant, was scrapped in the community testing environment for God knows what reason around 7 years ago. Moral of the story, if you're gonna go down the I wanna make my game more realistic path, then you should at least replace all fictional weapons with weapons that are actually real. I've said this before and I will say it again, but fictional weapons can't be changed for the quote-unquote sake of realism. It is not a valid justification under any circumstance. Since they're fictional, everything about their performance and ballistics is nothing but pure speculation. At that point, there's two things they could do. Either don't touch them at all and leave them as they are, or completely remove them to avoid stuff like this from happening in the future. Obviously guys, I'm not gonna go around and say, oh, they changed one singular gun, now the game is completely unplayable. At that point, I would tell you just stop using that gun and use something else until they change the gun again. Well, that's all I got for you today. Keep in mind that this is just my opinion on the situation, so feel free to disagree. But I would love to hear you guys' opinions though, so let me know down in the comments what do you think about this all. I'm Flamballer, and as customary, I'll catch you fellas in the next video.